I wanted to make a video here about oil. I haven't talked about oil before, and I haven't really been making a lot of videos recently, but um, this is a position I got into just a little bit ago, and it's moving fine for now, but it's not really about, the video is not going to be about this trade specifically. It's going to be about a case for oil, a bullish case for oil for the next 12 months plus, right? Um, Now, the timing may not be precise. This might not be the best place to get in. We might come down. And so, for instance, on this specific position, I have my stop underneath this low down here, which is, below this nice level, which is why we got in. We broke, came down and retested the level and started to move bullish, so I got in. And that is going well so far, but like I said, that doesn't mean we can't. I just moved that. Doesn't mean we can't come back down into this level again, right? So um, for that reason, I'll probably, if we go a little bit higher, I'll probably just move my stops to break even just to get rid of the risk, get the risk off of the table. That way, if we come back down, I'll be able to find another place to get in for a long position, right? So I'm not saying that right now at this second, oil is going to be, in a massive bull market. I think in the future, pretty soon it will be, but it may not be today, it may not be tomorrow, it might be a month or two from now, right? It could be whenever, but I'm just macro level. I'm making a case for an oil bull market. So let's go back actually really quick to gold. So I haven't made a lot of videos on gold recently, but I've had a couple trades here and there um, that have been pretty good. I haven't done. Let me go to a daily. I haven't done a whole lot of talking on them. I had some that were okay, right? Like here, Um, this one could have got better profit, but we've been talking for really ever since I started my channel. We've been talking about gold being bullish, um, and we've been right. We've been very good with that. Gold has been ripping, insane, and so that's been great, right? That's been awesome. But um, so I'm still keeping some focus on gold. But next, what I'm looking at, you always want to look at stuff that's under the radar. And right now, I think that's really oil. Um, Now, there's been a lot of talk with Venezuela, and so I wanted to get into that, right? Um, the thing with Venezuela, now you can have your opinions on it, on, whether it was right or wrong or whatever you think about the White House administration, all that stuff. But the thing that people aren't understanding about Venezuela is they think, oh, well, we have all this oil and we're going to flood the market with all this oil, make oil really cheap, right? Gas will be 50 cents a gallon, right? All that stuff. And so everyone thinks, you go on Twitter, everyone's saying, "Oh, this is going to put American oil companies out of business. There's going to be, the people who work in the oil fields. There's going to be layoffs, and um, it's going to ruin that industry, right?" But that really is not the case. That's really illogical to say that. So if we look at Venezuelan oil, um, let me just go to a lower time frame while we're talking. If we look at Venezuelan oil, right? Venezuelan oil is not the same oil that we make in America. So if you look at West Texas, okay, and like Midland and the Permian Basin area, we create very like thin and um, good quality oil that we drill out of that we take out of the ground, okay? It doesn't need to be going through a massive refining process, and it's not as dirty, and it's really good quality oil, right? That's why it's a big industry there. The oil in Venezuela is very thick. It's has high viscosity. It has sulfur in it. Um, it's not like it's not ready to go in a sense. So what they're doing is they're going to be sending this Venezuelan oil to refineries in, I believe, mostly in Texas or maybe only in Texas, and has to go through this refining process, and that adds cost, that adds expense to the production of the oil, right? Um, and so right there, that just shows that this couldn't be an immediate effect. Okay, so everyone is so bearish on oil because they're like, well, Trump's going to flood the market and sell its, 1.7 trillion, I think they have worth of the oil there in Venezuela. But the other thing to keep, but we have to remember the oil is not the same kind of oil. Okay, so it has to go through a refining process. it's basic essentially just worse quality oil, right? Um, it's like purifying a fat that you have, right? You can have a really dirty fat, and you have to, render it or strain it down and get out the bad things. That's essentially what they're doing, from my understanding, with this Venezuelan oil, and it's different oil in America, right? So the other thing is the oil industry in Venezuela is not very good. It's very far behind, and so I don't know what American company or companies will go down there and work on stuff, but they're essentially probably a good 2 years, maybe even 3 years, um, from being in like very good rapid development the way that America is. And so, um, the whole doom and gloom thing about, from the oil industry perspective of like, oh, we're gonna none of us are gonna have jobs now because oil is gonna be super cheap. And then you have the people who are happy because they're like, oh, gas is gonna be really cheap. Uh, maybe for a little bit, but just from the narrative. But in terms of actual, like, you know cause and effect, I don't really see that happening, at least for a couple years probably. And so anyway, when people are really, you know, bullish on something, and everyone is, there's usually a case to be bearish. When people are really bearish on something, there's usually a case to be bullish. And so I'm also thinking logically, right? Like, you could say maybe Trump wants to sell the oil cheap and try to flood the market to hurt other countries, right? But you look at China. China, I think, gets less than 10% of their oil from Venezuela. It might even be like 6%. It's not that much. Um, a lot of Venezuelan oil that they export goes to China, but in terms of the total that China imports, it's not a lot. And um, this could play into the whole Iran and Greenland thing as well, right? But right now, I'm mostly focused on the Venezuela thing. But like I said, those two other countries a can play a role in this, right? But it it doesn't make sense to me that Trump would take all this oil, 1.7 trillion, and not want to make a profit on it, right? And you could say, well, it's all technically profit because he stole it, right? Um, but it wouldn't make sense if you take all the oil, because Venezuela has the most oil reserves of any country on earth, okay? So if you take control of Venezuela, right, and you take control of their oil, why you have every incentive then to make the price of oil as expensive as you can. It doesn't make sense to say we're going to take all this oil and just sell it right away. You have every incentive then to make, once you have it, to make the price expensive, and you can make a massive profit. And in terms of who that goes to or how that works, I don't know, but it just doesn't make sense to me, especially as, people always say, oh, Trump's a businessman. It doesn't make sense for the government to take all this oil and not want to make a profit on it. So whether that has to do with Iran, maybe they intentionally took the oil and now they're going to start the conflict in Iran to try to, every time there's a war or conflict, oil goes up like crazy. Maybe they're trying to do that. Maybe that's not the whole story, but my whole point is the bearish case for oil doesn't really make sense to me right now. I'm looking the opposite direction. So anyway, I hope that makes sense. I'm not an expert in, like, you know, macroeconomics or, geopolitics, but I am I'm somewhat interested in it. And so that's really my case there, is it doesn't make sense to me to be bearish on oil right now. Um, it just doesn't. But in terms of our timing, I'm in this trade right now. We'll get back to the technicals now. I'm in this trade right now. Just because this is a good, if you just look at this section right here, specifically, this is a good setup, right? We have our nice structure here, strong resistance. We finally break through it, and we don't just casually break through it. We get a massive high volume candle breaking through it. Pull back in, we get a nice legitimate retest, and we get our bullish push up from there, and now we're flying, right? We're doing good. But like I said, this doesn't mean I'm going to try to hold this specific trade, you know, next 5 months until gold is like $100 or something. I'm not saying that. Um, like I said, I might, if this comes down, I might get out at break even, or try to close it with a little bit of profit, and conserve my profit, right? But I am making room for a potential, maybe lower prices before we really rally higher. So I want to get into that now. So let's hide this, right? Because we know this position, right? And this is not a legitimate take profit. I just have it up here because, you know, I'm not looking at a specific target. But obviously, if we do want to look at targets, let's go to a 4 hour. We could look initially up here, right? Maybe just that. Maybe if we go to a daily, um, yeah, one of these peaks, right? Then we would have another pullback before going higher. But anyway, let's hide this because I want to talk about some other levels. Oh, all right. So if we just look here, right, we had a gap here, so we could add a trend line and ignore this gap just from this previous high. Um, right, not a perfect trend line, but pretty decent, right? This level, this high, this peak right here, and we finally break through. So um, that could signify a reversal of this, decline. Maybe we'll pull back and then continue higher, but I'm not, as you know, I'm not super interested in trend lines. I use them sometimes, but not as like it's not as strong as horizontal support and resistance in my experience. So anyway, what I wanted to look at here on the daily chart, we see this massive zone I have highlighted here. This will be a major, major resistance for us here. You can see it on the daily. I hope you saw those levels of where it was touching. If we go especially to a weekly chart, we can really see it a bit better, right? Um, this is going to be now this is why, like I said, with my trade I'm in, I'm not trying to hold this forever, right? I'll hold it now for a little bit and we'll see sort of maybe we get up to this level, maybe we pull back before and go lower, but this is going to be a strong around the 67, 68 area, or yeah, around 67, 68 is going to be a really strong resistance for us. So, and yeah, we can go back to a monthly and really look at this on a higher scale. Um, yeah, this goes back really far, but we don't need to look at all that. But anyway, what I'm really looking at, if we sort of delay the bullish cycle, like the bullish run for oil, then we could potentially come back down to the 40 region, give or take around 40, which would be, yeah, that would be bad for the industry. But like I said, macroeconomically, it's if we're looking at, we're looking at the technicals right here, but if we're looking at the fundamentals, which everything I said about Venezuela and taking control of their oil, it logically just doesn't make sense to me to be too bearish on oil. So anyway, if we're gonna make a initial bearish and then bullish case, my thought process will be um, we test this level, and then we come down to here, maybe bounce around a little bit, and then we go much higher, right, from there. So that could be my, first bearish, then bullish case. Um, but like I said, I'm going to be in this trade now, and I'm in a little profit now, so that way I can always conserve it and I'll reduce my risk to zero. That way, if things turn around and don't go well, I won't lose any money. And then if we come down lower, I'll have even a better place to get in for better risk to reward. Because, another thing that people don't realize is essentially the elasticity of oil. So we have these massive rises and massive drops. So, and that can do with a lot of macroeconomic events, obviously, right? Like we have the 2008 crisis, um, but uh, when oil goes really high, um, they ramp up production. They hire more people. They try to drill for more oil. And then what that does is that increases the supply and lowers the price. When the price goes too low, they stop production or they slow production. They lay people off and then they produce less. So then the price goes higher, right? So, you know, it's not the same as it's not necessarily the same as gold or silver. There's some similarities, obviously, but it's not the same thing. So anyway, that was my sort of, you know, analysis for like maybe our bullish run is not right away, not super soon. Maybe we come up a little bit, maybe we push even a little bit higher than this, and then we crash back down. Anyway, I think this is going to be a prominent resistance level, and then if we fully reject this and come back lower, which obviously short term would be bad, then I think from there we will really rally. But if not, let's say this was the sort of the bottom here, what we would need to see is a move, and yeah, maybe we'll get a bearish candle here pretty soon. I mean, this is high volume here, right? This is pretty nice. Um, what we need to see if we're expecting this to be the bottom, because here I'm not gonna visualize this, but we do have a nice support right here, right? If we think this is going to be the bottom, um, then we're going to need to see this level be support. So we're going to need to see a move, obviously above, and we're going to need to see like you know, consistent support here as opposed to rejecting it as resistance. So anyway, that's um, sort of my hypothesis there, right? And in terms of long term, hope this is making sense. In terms of long term, right? I'm looking at 100 plus, maybe 150 plus. That might sound insane. That might sound crazy. But guys, I mean, if we get if the U.S. gets heavily involved in Iran, which I'm not speaking to the whether you think it's good or bad. I'm just looking at this financially, economically. Okay, if the U.S. does get involved in Iran and there's a conflict, that could cause other issues with other countries, right? We have there's a lot of reasons to believe China might be taking a move at Taiwan in the next year or so, which would be really bad. Um, and there's a whole lot of things that could be happening, right? That will skyrocket. Those kinds of conflicts skyrocket the price of oil. So my whole thought process right now is, it's the quote from Warren Buffett is you be greedy when others are fearful and you're fearful when others are greedy, right? So right now everyone on Twitter, they're like, "Oh, the oil industry in America is dead. It's done. We have all this Venezuelan oil." But guys, like I said, like I explained, that doesn't make sense. The country that will be really affected is probably Canada because Canada, I think for the most part, has the thicker oil that's similar to Venezuela as well. So if anything, Canada will be really affected, but I don't think we will here in America. So um, anyway, that's just sort of my thought process here. But whether we hit this resistance just under 70 and come back down, and then we really build a strong momentum to the upside, or we go up and retest this as support and then move to the upside. I think the next 12 months, uh, 12 to 24 months overall are going to be bullish on oil. Now, I could be totally wrong. Maybe none of this happens. Maybe it is very chaotic with American politics are really chaotic right now. A lot of times, like no one expected this thing with Venezuela to happen, right? Like maybe no one understands why it's happening. We don't even fully understand the reasons behind it, but a whole lot can happen, okay? You know, maybe there's some plan that we're not aware of, right? Obviously, but um my whole thought process, so like I could be wrong, right? But my whole thought process is I've been focusing on gold and I still will. But next, I'm really curious about oil. I think oil could be the next thing to really rip. And if that's the case, you better enjoy your cheap gas now, right? But anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Let me know what you think. This is my hypothesis, my idea here. Um, this is just I'm just a guy with an opinion. Like I said, I could be totally wrong. But yeah, that's let's unhide this. Yeah, so here's my position again. Like I said, I could be wrong, but let me know what you think about oil and you think about this whole situation. And yeah, I mean, I could go to break even now, and that would obviously be a much higher likelihood of being stopped out. But if we were above this level already, I would have probably a larger stop loss and a smaller lot size because then I'd be really holding for the longer term. But like I said, I am skeptical of this level. And then maybe obviously, strong support, the stronger the support and resistance is, it's like a magnet, right? It's the bigger the magnet, the more it attracts, right? And so if you have a stronger support and resistance, it's like a stronger magnet. And so you will at some point in time retest those levels. That's just the way it works. So like I said, I'm not saying my timing is perfect. This might not be the bottom, but it might be. So anyway, just wanted to make a quick little video and let me know what you think about oil and then also what you think about gold. if you've been taking trades on gold or not. So anyway, all right, have a good one.